Preliminary Statement. CARICOM Election Observation Mission to the 2025 General Election in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. In response to an invitation extended by the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the Caribbean Community, CARICOM, mounted a 10-member CARICOM Election Observation Mission to observe the general elections held on the 27th November 2025. The mission is in keeping with the commitment of heads of government of the CARICOM community to support member states on their request by providing an independent, impartial, and honest assessment of the preparations for and the conduct of general elections. The CARICOM Election Observation Mission was comprised of senior electoral and other officials from Antigua and Barbuda, Barbados, Dominica, Grenada, Guyana, Suriname, and Trinidad and Tobago, as well as 3 members of the CARICOM Secretariat who provide administrative and logistical support. To adequately provide the independent, impartial, and honest assessment referenced earlier, the CEOM set out to 1. Observe the entire election process in the host country, including the general atmosphere and environmental conditions under which the elections were being conducted, the activities at the polling stations on the day of the elections, the counting and tabulation of votes after the closing of polls, and the political climate after the announcement of results. 2. Collect qualitative and quantitative data regarding the entire election process, including the general administration of the election by election officials and the conduct of stakeholders, such as political actors, civil society, the media, and the voting public at large. And 3. Identify opportunities for improvement and make appropriate and timely recommendations. Pre-election period. During the pre-election period, the CEOM engaged several stakeholders to ascertain critical information on the country's electoral laws and practices. These aided in further understanding the political culture and broader environment within which the elections were being held. In this context, the CEOM met with Dr. the Honorable Ralph Gonsalves, then Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and leader of the United Labour Party, ULP, and completed a series of engagements with the Honorable Daniel Cummings, Chairman of the New Democratic Party, representing Dr. the Honorable Godwin Friday, then leader of the opposition, and of the NDP, Dr. Doris Frederick, leader of the National Liberation Movement, NLM, and Ms. Kenneth Kettles, independent candidate for West St. George. The CEOM also engaged civic organizations, including representatives of the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Teachers Union, the Voice of the Disabled, the National Society for the Blind, the Public Service Union, Red Root SVG Incorporated, National Monitoring and Consultative Mechanism, NMCM, Caribbean Women in Leadership, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Police Welfare Service, the National Workers Union, Commercial, Technical and Allied Workers Union, and the media. The CEOM also met with Ms. Dora James, Supervisor of Elections, and Mr. Enville Williams, Commissioner of Police, as well as a team of senior officials from the Royal St. Vincent and the Grenadines Police Force. During these engagements, the main issues below were raised. Preparations made by the Electoral Office. While most stakeholders expressed confidence about the preparedness of the Electoral Office to conduct the elections, issues such as inadequate training for and bias in the appointment of electoral officials were highlighted. Concerns were also raised about accommodation for differently abled persons. The voters list and the registration process. The manner in which the voters list was compiled, particularly the conduct of the 15-day special registration exercise, was a recurrent complaint. Stakeholders also commented on the manner and timeliness of the distribution of the said list to candidates. Voter education. Stakeholders commended the voter education resources provided by the Electoral Office. However, at least one stakeholder found it necessary to provide supplementary resources to educate the public. Campaign financing and the use of state resources. Most stakeholders were curious about the source of funding for the purportedly elaborate campaigns run by the two major political parties and considered whether campaign financing or integrity legislation requiring disclosure would remedy this. Comments were also made about the use of state resources, particularly the timing thereof, to allegedly influence voters. External interference in the electoral process. Stakeholders expressed concern about the presence of persons unconnected to St. Vincent and the Grenadines during the election season and their possible interference in the electoral process. Security concerns. Stakeholders were fearful of possible post-election violence triggered by rhetoric on the campaign trail and other connected factors. Elections Day observations. The CEOM conducted observation in over 85% of polling stations across mainland St. Vincent. Observation included the opening of the polls, the voting process throughout the day, the closing of the polls, and the counting process. A summary of the observation follows. Opening of polls. Polls generally opened on time at 7 a.m., and there was a sufficient supply of the required voting materials at all polling stations. Nonetheless, in some instances, the opening was delayed by uncertainty and experience on the part of some polling staff during the pre-poll activities and lack of preparation of the places of poll prior to Elections Day. Observers also noted inconsistencies in the procedures adopted by presiding officers across polling stations. The voting process. Throughout the day, observers noted long lines at several polling stations caused by inadequate access to, ingress, egress, and flow of electors in and out of polling stations. This was compounded in some instances by insufficient poll staff and large numbers of electors assigned to certain polling stations. It was observed that in instances where party agents were active within the 100-yard boundary, no steps were taken to prevent these occurrences. While police ranks were present in the immediate vicinity of the polling station, there was no visible presence outside of the polling places. Insufficiency of voter education was highlighted by the frequency with which electors encountered issues with the voting process. In a few instances, this resulted in a violation of the secrecy of the ballot. The closing. At the closing of the polls at 5 p.m., people remaining in the line were allowed to vote. There was adherence to the specified closing procedures. Nonetheless, as with the opening of the polls, the method utilized varied by the polling station and presiding officer. In some instances, there was also uncertainty about the mode of transport of the completed ballot boxes to the returning officers. Conclusion. While there were some operational and staffing challenges, overall, the general elections in St. Vincent and the Grenadines were orderly, peaceful, and conducted in an atmosphere of robust civic engagement and camaraderie among the electorate. The CEOM will prepare a full report for submission to the Secretary General of the Caribbean Community, CARICOM, which will include recommendations for the conduct of future elections in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The CARICOM Election Observation Mission wishes to express gratitude to the leaders of the political parties, civil society groups, other stakeholders, the media, and the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines for their warm welcome and cooperation, which contributed to the success of this endeavor. Thank you.